It started with silence, the kind that did not arrive all at once but slowly crept into a home that once felt warm and alive. Ion noticed it in small ways at first, almost too small to name. Mihor no longer rushed to tell him about her day the moment she walked through the door. She used to talk while removing her shoes, while pouring water, while laughing at little things that happened at work. Now she would simply nod, place her bag down carefully, and move past him with a tired smile that didn't reach her eyes. Their home had always been full of light, even on ordinary days. They had built a quiet routine together, one that didn't need grand gestures. Ion would cook sometimes. Mihor would tease him about using too much salt. And they would end up laughing over something small and silly. But lately, the rhythm had broken. Dinner was quieter. Conversations were shorter. Even the air felt heavier, as if something unspoken was sitting between them at the table. Ion told himself not to overthink. Mihor had started a new job a few months ago. It was a big opportunity, something she had worked hard for. The company was well known, the position important. Long hours were expected. Pressure was normal. He reminded himself of all this every time he felt that strange tightness in his chest. But the feeling didn't go away. One evening, he reached home earlier than usual. The house was still. Mihor wasn't back yet. He checked the time. She was late again. It had been happening more often. He walked into the kitchen, opened the fridge, then closed it again without taking anything. He didn't feel hungry. Instead, he sat on the couch and waited, staring at the door as if it would tell him something before she even arrived. When the door finally opened, Mihor stepped in quietly. She looked exhausted, not just physically tired, but drained in a deeper way. Her shoulders were slightly bent, her movements slow. Ion stood up immediately. "You're late," he said gently, not as a complaint, but as concern. "Yeah," she replied, avoiding his eyes. "Work." Just one word. No details. He nodded, though it didn't satisfy him. "Did you eat?" "I'm not really hungry." That was new. Mihor never skipped meals, no matter how busy she was. He watched her as she moved around the house, changing clothes, washing her face, doing everything as if she were on autopilot. She didn't ask him about his day. She didn't sit beside him like she used to. Instead, she picked up her phone and scrolled silently. Ion sat there feeling like a stranger in his own living room. Days passed like that. Small changes added up. Mihor started waking up earlier than usual, leaving before breakfast. Sometimes she skipped coffee, which was almost impossible for her before. She began checking her phone more often, her expression tightening every time a message appeared. And every time Ion tried to ask, she would brush it off with the same answer: "I'm just tired." But Ion knew her version of tired. This was different. One night, while they were lying in bed, Ion turned toward her. The room was dark, but he could still see the outline of her face. "Mihor," he said softly, "you've been quiet lately." "I know," she replied after a pause. "Is something wrong?" Another pause. Longer this time. "No," she said finally. "It's just work pressure." An didn't push further, but he didn't believe it either. There was something in her voice, something hesitant, something guarded. It felt like she was holding back words that were sitting right at the edge but refusing to come out. He turned back, staring at the ceiling, feeling helpless. The next few days only made things worse. Mihor began coming home even later. Sometimes she looked upset, sometimes distant, sometimes both. Ion tried to lighten the mood, suggesting they go out for dinner or watch a movie like they used to. She agreed once, but even then she seemed distracted, checking her phone again and again. At one point during dinner, Ion reached across the table and held her hand. "You're not really here, are you?" he said quietly. Mihor blinked, as if waking up from a thought. "I am." "No," he said gently. "You're somewhere else." She pulled her hand back slowly. "I told you, it's just work." Ion sighed, leaning back. Work doesn't change someone like this. That sentence hung in the air. Mihor looked down at her plate, her jaw tightening slightly. "Can we not do this right now?" she said, almost pleading. Ion nodded. He didn't want to fight. He just wanted to understand. But understanding felt far away. One evening while Meher was in the shower, her phone lit up on the bedside table. Ion didn't mean to look, but the screen caught his attention. A message notification. No name, just a number saved without details. He hesitated. He trusted her. He really did. But something inside him pushed him to glance at the screen. The message was short. Still thinking about what I said today? Ion's heart skipped. He stepped back immediately, as if he had done something wrong just by reading it. He didn't open the phone. He didn't scroll. But that one line was enough to plant a storm in his mind. When Mayhor came out of the shower, she picked up her phone and checked it quickly. Her expression changed for a brief second before she locked the screen again. Ion watched her carefully. "Who is that?" he asked, trying to sound casual. "Just work," she replied instantly. The answer came too fast. Ion nodded slowly, but inside, his thoughts were racing. Work didn't send messages like that. Not at that hour. Not with that tone. That night, sleep didn't come easily. Ion lay awake, replaying everything in his mind. The late nights. The silence. The guarded behavior. The message. He didn't want to doubt her. Mayhor had always been honest with him. Their relationship was built on trust. But something was clearly wrong, and pretending everything was normal wasn't helping anyone. The next morning, he decided he needed to approach things differently. Not with suspicion, not with pressure, but with patience. When Mayhor sat down to wear her shoes, Ion crouched beside her. "Hey," he said softly. She looked at him, surprised. You can tell me anything, right?" Her eyes softened for a moment, but then something flickered across her face, fear, maybe, or hesitation. "I know," she said. "Then why aren't you—" She looked away. "I just don't want to make things complicated," she whispered. Ion felt a sharp ache in his chest. "We're married, Mayher. Complicated is part of the deal." She gave a faint smile, but it didn't last. "I'll handle it," she said, standing up quickly. That sentence stayed with him the entire day. "I'll handle it." Handle what? The question echoed in his mind again and again. That evening, the rain started unexpectedly. Heavy drops hit the windows, filling the house with a steady sound. Ion stood near the window, watching the streets blur under the rain. It should have felt peaceful, but instead it made everything feel more intense. When Mayher came home, she looked different. Not just tired, shaken. Her hair was slightly messy, her face pale. She closed the door behind her slowly, as if gathering strength just to stand there. Ion's heart tightened immediately. "What happened?" he asked, walking toward her. Mayhor didn't answer right away. She put her bag down carefully, her hands trembling just a little. "Maher?" he said again, his voice softer now, filled with concern. She finally looked at him. And in that moment, Ion knew. Whatever she had been hiding, it was bigger than he had imagined. Her eyes were filled with something he had never seen before. Not just stress, not just sadness, fear. She took a deep breath as if trying to steady herself. "Ion," she said quietly, her voice almost breaking, "there's something I need to tell you about my boss." And just like that, the silence that had been growing between them was finally about to break. Mahar's confession hung in the air, heavy and suffocating, as Ion listened intently. She had always been careful with her words, measured and calm, but tonight her voice trembled slightly, betraying the storm of emotions she had carried alone for weeks. "It started small," she began, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. "At first it was just compliments about my work. Harmless words, or so I thought. He praised me too much, made me feel like I was the only one he truly noticed in the office." Ion's eyes narrowed. But he stayed silent, letting her speak, knowing that pushing her too soon might make her shut down completely. Mihar continued, her voice soft but urgent. "I didn't notice it at first. I thought maybe I was imagining things. But then the compliments became personal. He would comment on how I dressed, how I smiled, even on my posture. It made me uncomfortable, but I tried to ignore it, thinking it was just his way of being friendly or encouraging. Ion reached out and held her hand, squeezing it gently. "You shouldn't have had to deal with that alone," he said, his voice low but steady. Mahor shook her head slightly, tears brimming in her eyes. "I didn't want to worry you," she admitted. "I thought I could manage it. I thought maybe if I ignored it, it would go away." Ion felt his chest tighten. He had always trusted Mahor's strength, but the thought of her carrying this burden quietly made him ache. He could see the fight and hurt the determination that had always drawn him to her, but also the exhaustion, the strain of pretending everything was normal when it wasn't. She took a deep breath, gathering the courage to continue. Then one day, he asked me to stay late after work. He said it was urgent, that he needed to discuss something important. I didn't want to, but I thought maybe it was a work matter. Maybe I could handle it if it was just a meeting. Her hands trembled now as she recalled the moment. But it wasn't work. Not at all. He started talking about things that had nothing to do with my job. About life. About how he could make things better for me. How I deserved more. Mahar's voice faltered. He said things that made me feel vulnerable. I felt trapped. I told him no. I reminded him that I loved my husband, that my life was with Ion, that nothing he offered could ever change that. But he didn't listen. He tried to convince me, subtly at first, then more insistently. And when he realized I wouldn't give in, that's when he started to turn cold. Ion's jaw tightened. He wanted to stand, to yell, to confront the injustice immediately, but he stayed seated, letting Mahar finish. She continued. After that day, everything at work changed. He started criticizing me unnecessarily, questioning my decisions, making me doubt myself. Meetings became uncomfortable. He would linger in doorways, watch me, make subtle comments that undermined me. I felt like I was constantly on edge, like I was always being tested or watched. I didn't know how to handle it. Her words were rushed now, spilling out as if she feared she might not have the courage to speak again if she paused. I tried to maintain professionalism. I tried to ignore him, to focus on my work. But every day it got harder. I couldn't think straight. I couldn't sleep properly. And I started withdrawing from friends, from family, from you. Ion held her closer now, wrapping his arm around her shoulders. "I'm here," he whispered. "You're not alone." Her leaned into him, grateful for the quiet reassurance. She wiped a tear from her cheek and continued. "I didn't want to tell you at first because I thought it would ruin everything. I thought I could manage it on my own, but I can't anymore. I can't keep living in fear, pretending like everything is fine when it isn't. And now, I feel like I'm reaching my limit." Ion nodded silently. He had felt the tension building between them, the distance, the quiet nights filled with unspoken worry. But hearing her speak the truth made the problem real, concrete, and urgent. He could no longer ignore it. He had to act. Then what happened next? He asked softly, trying to steady his own nerves. Mihor hesitated, looking down at her hands. "One day, I couldn't take it anymore. I went to him and confronted him directly," she said, her voice shaking but determined. "I told him that his behavior was unacceptable, that he had no right to cross boundaries, that I would not tolerate it. I thought that would be the end of it. I thought that speaking up would make him stop." She paused, swallowing hard. But it didn't. Instead, he became more aggressive, more manipulative. He tried to gaslight me, to make me feel like I was overreacting, like I was imagining things. It was exhausting. I started doubting myself for a moment, wondering if maybe I had misread everything. But deep down, I knew what was right. I knew I wasn't wrong. Ion squeezed her hand tighter. "You were never wrong," he said firmly. Mahar nodded, her eyes shining with gratitude. "I kept documenting everything," she continued. "Every message, every uncomfortable interaction, every comment that crossed the line. I knew I had to protect myself. I had to have proof. And I kept telling myself this isn't about revenge. It's about standing up for myself, about protecting my dignity, about making sure this doesn't happen to anyone else." Her voice grew steadier as she spoke, the fear slowly giving way to a quiet strength. But it's terrifying, she admitted. Every day I worry about my job, about retaliation, about losing everything I've worked for. And I worry about us, about our life together. I didn't want you to feel the weight of this too. Ion shook his head. You've already carried it alone for too long, he said. Now it's my turn to be with you, to help you to face it together. He could feel the tension in her body slowly easing as she realized he meant every word. He was her partner, her safe place, the one person who would never let her face this alone. We'll handle it together, he said softly. No more hiding. No more fear. We'll confront this the right way. Mayhart looked at him, hope flickering in her eyes. But what if it makes things worse? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ion smiled faintly. Sometimes doing the right thing is scary, he admitted. Sometimes standing up for yourself means facing discomfort. But if we do nothing, nothing changes. We can't let fear dictate our lives. She nodded slowly, absorbing his words. The storm inside her felt lighter, knowing she wasn't alone anymore. That someone she loved deeply was willing to face the challenges with her. The next day, Mayhor went to work with a renewed sense of purpose, though nerves still ran high. Ion stayed in touch throughout the day, sending her messages of encouragement, reminding her to stay strong, to document everything, to trust her instincts. Mayhor found small pockets of courage she hadn't realized she still possessed. Every encounter with Rayan, the boss, was tense, but she faced it head-on. Calmly, professionally, without backing down. His attempts to intimidate or manipulate were met with quiet confidence. She refused to be broken, and she refused to be silenced by the end of the week. The situation at work reached a tipping point. Rayan tried subtle tactics to isolate her, to undermine her. But Mayhor, with Ion's support, remained composed. She began reaching out to HR discreetly, sending polite but firm emails documenting every inappropriate comment and interaction. Each time she did, she felt a small victory, a reclaiming of power that had been slowly eroded. She realized that standing up for herself didn't just mean confronting the boss, it meant protecting her own self-respect, her dignity, and her sense of peace. One afternoon, during a particularly tense meeting, Rayan attempted to corner her with a subtle threat veiled as a comment about her work. Mayhor took a deep breath and responded calmly but assertively, making it clear that she would not tolerate inappropriate behavior. The room was silent for a moment, colleagues exchanging glances, sensing the tension. She could feel Rayan's frustration, but she also sensed a shift her courage. Her steadfastness was beginning to change the dynamics. She had taken the first real step toward reclaiming control. And it felt empowering. When she got home that evening, Ion was waiting, concern written across his face. She told him everything as soon as she walked in the door, the confrontation, the subtle threats, the ongoing pressure. He listened without interruption, holding her hand, never judging, never doubting. They discussed their next steps calmly, focusing on evidence, strategy, and emotional support. They talked long into the night, planning carefully how to approach HR formally, how to protect themselves, and how to maintain professionalism at work. It was a turning point, a moment when fear began to be replaced by purpose. Mayhor realized that she wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for every colleague who might feel powerless in similar situations. The weight on her shoulders was heavy, but now it carried meaning. Ion's unwavering support reminded her that love wasn't just about comfort and joy. It was about standing together in the hardest moments, facing adversity side by side. That evening, as they sat together in the quiet of their living room, Mayhor felt a spark of hope she hadn't felt in weeks. She understood that change would not be immediate, that the path ahead would be challenging. But she also understood that she no longer had to face it alone. And that knowledge gave her strength. The morning sun felt different that day, almost as if it carried a new kind of energy. Mayhor woke up with a tight knot of nerves in her stomach, but beneath it, there was also a spark of determination. Today, she and Ion had decided would be the day they took action together. The fear that had haunted her for weeks still lingered, but it no longer had the power to paralyze her. They were ready. They were no longer two people facing an invisible threat separately. They were a team. Together, they would confront what had been festering in silence, and they would reclaim their lives. Ion had been patient, kind, supportive, and unwavering, and his calm strength gave Meher the courage to face the storm she had endured alone for far too long. By mid-morning, Mahor arrived at the office with a sense of purpose. She walked in quietly, but her posture was firm. Each step felt heavier with anxiety, yet lighter with resolve. Rayan, her boss, noticed her immediately. His eyes lingered on her in a way that had made her uncomfortable countless times before. But today was different. She did not shrink away. She did not avert her gaze. She looked him straight in the eye, meeting his stare with a calm, unwavering confidence that he had never seen from her before. Rayan's smile faltered slightly. He was used to subtly intimidating her, making her feel small, uncertain, and unsure of herself. But now, the air between them shifted. Something had changed. She was no longer afraid to assert her boundaries. Throughout the day, Mehar began systematically presenting the evidence she had collected. Emails, messages, documented interactions, everything she had silently recorded for weeks, were now tools of empowerment. Whenever Rayan tried to undermine her or make veiled comments, she responded with professionalism and composure. She did not raise her voice. She did not make accusations without evidence. She simply stated facts. Every word she spoke was a reminder that she was no longer defenseless. Ion's earlier advice echoed in her mind. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's acting despite it. And act she did, with quiet determination. As the afternoon approached, Mehar requested a private meeting with HR. Her hands shook as she knocked on the door. But she drew strength from the thought that Ion would be waiting for her after work, ready to support her no matter what. Once inside, she presented her case clearly and calmly. She described every inappropriate message, every uncomfortable encounter, every moment Rayan had tried to manipulate or intimidate her. She emphasized that her goal was not revenge, but fairness, safety, and accountability. The HR team listened attentively, taking notes, asking clarifying questions, and ensuring that every detail was documented. Mehar left the meeting feeling a mixture of relief and anticipation. She had spoken the truth. She had defended herself. The next steps would be out of her hands, but she knew she had done everything she could. When she returned to her desk, the tension in the office was palpable. Rayan's colleagues had begun to notice the subtle changes in the dynamic. Mehar no longer avoided eye contact, no longer hesitated to speak, no longer allowed herself to be dismissed. The one subtle power he wielded over her had weakened. He tried to maintain a semblance of authority, but it was clear that his control was slipping. Mehar's composure, coupled with the evidence she had presented to HR, had shifted the balance. She was no longer a passive target. She was an empowered individual ready to face the consequences of speaking out. By the end of the day, Mehar returned home to Ion, her steps lighter than they had been in weeks. He greeted her with a gentle smile and a warm embrace. "How did it go?" he asked softly, sensing the tension in her body. Mehar exhaled deeply, allowing herself to relax slightly. "It went as well as it could," she said. "I told them everything. They listened. They're taking it seriously." An nodded, holding her close. "I'm proud of you," he said, his voice filled with genuine admiration. "You've been so strong, and you faced this head-on." Mehar leaned into him, tears threatening to fall. But this time they were tears of relief, not fear. "I couldn't have done it without you," she admitted. "You gave me the strength to keep going." The following days were tense, filled with anticipation and uncertainty. HR began an official investigation, speaking with other employees and gathering additional evidence. It became clear that Rayan's behavior had not been isolated to Mehar. Other employees had experienced similar issues, but had been too afraid to speak up. Mehar realized that by confronting the problem, she had not only defended herself, but also created a path for others to find their voices. The weight of responsibility was heavy, but it carried a sense of purpose that energized her. She felt proud, empowered, and resolute. Meanwhile, Rayon's demeanor shifted noticeably. He tried to maintain a facade of professionalism, but the office atmosphere had changed. His subtle attempts to intimidate Maher no longer worked. He realized that the evidence against him was mounting, that HR was fully aware of the situation, and that his position of control was slipping. Every glance Mahor gave him, every confident word she spoke, was a reminder that his actions had consequences. The balance of power had shifted, and he could feel it. The same office that had once felt suffocating to Maher now felt like a space where truth and courage were reclaiming dominance. One afternoon, the HR team called a meeting with Rayon, detailing the complaints and the evidence. Mahor was not required to attend, but she felt a sense of closure, knowing that her truth was being heard. Ion remained by her side at home, providing comfort and reassurance. He reminded her constantly that her courage mattered, that speaking up was not just an act of self-defense, but a stand for justice. Mahor felt a deep sense of gratitude for his unwavering support. She understood now that love was not just about companionship and happy times. It was about facing challenges together, about standing side by side when life demanded strength, honesty, and resilience. As the investigation continued, Mahar noticed subtle changes in her colleagues' behavior. Whispers of support, nods of acknowledgement, and quiet conversations indicated that others were noticing her courage. Some approached her privately to share their own experiences, thanking her for inspiring them to speak up. Mahor realized that her actions had a ripple effect, empowering others to reclaim their voices. The realization filled her with a sense of purpose that far outweighed the fear she had carried for so long. She understood that courage was contagious, and that by standing up for herself, she had helped create a safer, more accountable environment for everyone. Finally, after several tense days, the company made its decision. Rayon was removed from his position. The announcement was professional, factual, and clear. While the outcome was significant, the real victory for Maher was the affirmation that standing up for herself and seeking help had consequences real. Meaningful consequences that restored a sense of justice and integrity. She felt a wave of relief wash over her, a mix of exhaustion, satisfaction, and quiet triumph. The fear that had shadowed her life for weeks began to dissipate, replaced by a newfound confidence and a sense of empowerment. When Maher returned home that evening, she was greeted by Ion with open arms. "It's over," he said softly, holding her close. She rested her head on his shoulder, feeling the tension of the past weeks melt away. "Yes," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. But these were tears of relief, of release, of victory. "We did it," Ion said, his voice filled with quiet pride. "You did it." "Ha!" Smiled through her tears, realizing that this moment marked a new chapter in their lives. The silence, the fear, the tension, they were gone, replaced by trust, love, and unwavering support. In the days that followed, life gradually returned to normal, though Maher and Ion carried with them the lessons of the past weeks. Their relationship deepened, strengthened by the trials they had faced together. Mahara's confidence at work blossomed, her voice steady and assured. She no longer felt the shadow of intimidation looming over her. She knew she could face challenges head-on with Ion by her side and her own strength guiding her. The experience had taught her the value of honesty, courage, and the power of standing up for oneself in the face of adversity. Ion and Mahor celebrated quietly, cherishing the moments of normalcy they had once taken for granted. They went for walks, cooked together, laughed at small jokes, and talked late into the night. Every conversation, every shared glance, was infused with a sense of gratitude and closeness that had deepened through the trials they had endured. They knew that challenges would come again, but they also knew that together they could face anything. Love, after all, was not just about comfort. It was about resilience, partnership, and the courage to protect one another. As the weeks passed, Mahor reflected on the journey she had undergone. The fear, the anxiety, the moments of doubt, they had all been transformed into lessons of strength, stout, and empowerment. She understood now that confronting injustice was never easy, but it was necessary. She felt proud not only for herself but for every colleague whose experience had contributed to change. By taking a stand, she had helped create a safer, more respectful workplace for others. That realization brought her a sense of fulfillment that was both humbling and empowering.